Hello, my name is Dr. Luke Bell. I'm lecturer in molecular horticulture at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom. This is a screencast of material originally made available for the module Principles of Horticulture and Crop Production from the years 2020 to 2025. Please note that some of the details may now be outdated.
So the learning outcomes are to give examples of the main types of cultivated melons and muskmelons, name some of the main melon cultivation nations in the world, describe optimal growing conditions for melon crops, give an example of a disease of melon crops, and describe the optimal post-harvest storage conditions for cantaloupe melons. So melons and muskmelons, they originate actually from parts of Africa. And muskmelons were cultivated in Egypt as far back as 2400 BCE. The netted melons that we're familiar with were also grown in ancient Greece in 300 BCE, and the term netted refers to the kind of patterning of the skin, so you can see that in this slide. Today, wild relatives are found in sub-Saharan Africa. So many different cultivars of many different sizes and shapes and colours have been developed throughout history. And melons were first introduced to the Americas in the 15th and 16th centuries. And today melons are eaten fresh as salad or dessert fruits. So melons and muskmelons, the name is a kind of general term for fruit of the Cucurbitaceae family of plants, but the actual species name is called Cucumis melo. And there are currently 8 horticulturally recognised groups of melon crops. So the first is cantaleupensis, which is perhaps the most economically important group, and this includes netted melons, muskmelons and cantaloupes. And it includes some highly and lightly netted varieties and non-netted cultivars of melons. So cantaloupes, which you may be familiar with, are associated with productions in North and Central America, where they're quite common in the more warmer regions of Central America, and they're suitable for long distance shipping. And they can weigh anywhere between 1.5 and 2 kilograms, and have a uniform netting pattern across the skin, and usually thick flesh and a small seed cavity within the center of the fruit. So muskmelons, muskmelon cultivars are grown in more humid environments, and they're distinguished from cantaloupes by their larger size. So they usually weigh anywhere between 2.3 and 3.6 kilograms, and they have this distinctive ribbing pattern and vein tracts along the skin. So as a general rule of thumb, cantaloupes are small, and muskmelons are large, and they have, as I say, they have this distinctive green ribbing pattern on the skin. They have a strong aroma and a large seed cavity within the center of the fruit, but most muskmelons have a poor shelf life. Then we move on to the inodorous type of melon, and these are quite unusual. So as you can see in this slide, they look more like a cucumber than they do a melon perhaps, but this group of melons includes winter melon types and other mixed type melons. It is an economically important group and can be intercrossed with the cantaleupensis group to generate new and different varieties. The inodorous group can be stored for several weeks post-harvest. The types of inodorous melons include cassava, canary, honeydew, Crenshaw and Santa Claus types. These lack the heavy netting of the cantaloupe and muskmelon types, and are less aromatic than other groups, but one exception is the Crenshaw melon, which has a short shelf life and a very strong aroma. And just as an example of one of the more popular inodorous types is the honeydew. So you may have seen this or eaten this from a supermarket, and it typically has a pale green or white rind or skin, and the flesh inside is usually pale green to white. These have a moderate shelf life of a few weeks, and was actually developed from a French cultivar by breeders in the United States. The Crenshaw melon is unusual in that it was the result of a random mutation which was found in a crop of muskmelons. So it has fairly unusual skin colouring, it has an unusually oblong shape, but it also has several less beneficial traits compared to other melons, in that it's sensitive to sunburn and has a poor shelf life quality. The flesh inside is actually a salmon kind of colour, and it's quite aromatic, which is makes it different from many of the other inodorous types. Then we have the cassava melon. Again, you may have found this in supermarkets in the UK. This has a hard yellow rind on the outside. The flesh typically has little to no aroma and is generally white to pale green. They're well adapted to being shipped and can be stored for several weeks. Then we move on to one of the most unusual types of melon, called the flexuous type, and this is more commonly known as an Armenian cucumber, but it isn't actually a cucumber. It is of the same species as the other melon type, so Cucumis mello. And it's also known as the snake melon or serpent melon, which is obviously comes from its distinctive cucumber-like shape, but it actually has quite a large cavity inside, which contains many seeds. Then we have the common melon type. So this is also known as the oriental pickling type, and it's more common in Asian countries. Then there's the Cheeto type. This includes the mango melon, so called because of its distinctive skin colour, and it's also known as the vine peach melon. And then perhaps my favourite is the Dudame type of melon. So these are actually very small, a few centimetres across, and they're also known as pocket melons, and they come in all these diverse colours. So you have the green types, but you also have the quite vibrant red and orange types, which are known as Queen Anne's pocket melon. Then we have the Momodica, and this is known as the snap melon. It's not that common really, but it's so called because as it grows, the skin there, you can see there's these cracks along the skin, so that's the reason for its name. And it kind of makes them look like baked loaves of bread, but this cracking occurs as the fruits mature and grow. And then finally we have the agrestis type, which kind of encompasses all of the wild relatives of melon and some domesticated local cultivars. So in terms of field establishment, so obviously in the UK it's not grown in open field because its optimum growth temperature is very high, so 35 degrees Celsius. So germination is typically slow and erratic when temperatures are below 20 degrees C, so it's not a crop for growing in temperate regions very much. So pretty much all of the melons that we consume in the UK are imported. The fruits develop poorly at temperatures below 21 degrees C, but similarly higher temperatures greater than 43 degrees can cause the plants to wilt and the fruits to soften. So plants are usually planted into rows, spaced about 2 meters apart to facilitate growth and harvesting. So in-row spacing is between 5 to 25 centimeters. Seeds are planted at a depth of about 1.3 to 2.5 centimeters. And when plants have around about 2 to 4 leaves on them, the rows can be thinned out to give more space to the larger plants. So then the spacing ends up being around about 20 centimeters between plants. And just to give you an idea of the spacing and density requirements of the crop, so if you've got very small in-row spacing, obviously you have much higher seeds per hectare requirement, and vice versa. So very wide spacing, you have a lower seeds per hectare. So in terms of irrigation, melons actually have only a moderate requirement for irrigation because they have quite deep and extensive root systems, so they require less water than some other crops might. Nevertheless, irrigation is managed until the pre-vining stage to avoid cooling of the soil and to prevent disease build-up within the crop. The final irrigation is usually 7 to 10 days before the harvest. So in terms of disease, as with all crops, there are a whole host of different diseases which might affect a crop, but one of the most severe diseases of melons might be bacterial wilt. So this is called Erwinia trachyphilia, and it's particularly devastating. So you can see in this picture here, there's a whole tract there of melon plants which have been kind of wiped out by this bacterial wilt. And it's caused by bacterial infections clogging the xylem vessels inside the stems of the plant, which reduces water flow. So therefore the affected plants must be removed quite quickly, because bugs and pests which feed on the plants might then spread the infection to others which are nearby. So as with cucumbers, flowering and pollination of melon varieties is quite important. Melons have a flowering property called andronomonaceous flowering, quite hard to pronounce. So the flowers are hermaphroditic, but they also have flowers which are solely male, so they only produce pollen. So the flowers only open for 1 day in a year. So while the plant will continue flowering for a period, any individual flower will only open for 1 day. So having an adequate amount of pollinators available will ensure a good crop. So each flower actually needs between 10 and 15 bee visits to effectively pollinate it. So you need quite a high number of bees present within the crop. Most vines will only support a few fruits growing on it at a time, and later flowers will not set on that vine if other fruits are becoming more well established. So there's an inhibitory effect of established fruits on the flowering on that particular vine. So in terms of ripening, so some netted melons and cantaloupe muskmelon types actually detach from the vine themselves when they're ripened, and this process is called slip, and it occurs in 4 stages. So for the harvesting of these types of melons, the grower can actually wait for the plant to naturally detach from the growing vine. Not all types do this, so some have to be harvested manually when the fruits ripen. So, as I said, many cultivars do not have that property and do not detach from the vine upon ripening. And so this has kind of led to some quite interesting growing methods and cultivation methods for squashes and melons in different countries, so particularly Japan. And so they're grown in archways like this, so the fruits will hang down under the archway, which facilitates the harvesting of the fruits. So when they're ripe, they'll just simply be cut off. And this process can last indefinitely as long as the plants keep flowering. So in terms of post-harvest storage, melons are typically cooled to between 10 and 13 degrees C by forced air cooling, and the shelf life quality of melons can be improved by using modified atmosphere. So typically they'll be transported in atmospheres which are of low oxygen, high carbon dioxide, and typically at quite cold temperatures of about 3 degrees C. So in summary, melon and muskmelon cultivars are highly diverse in appearance and post-harvest quality. China is again the world's largest producer of melons and muskmelons. Crops require very hot growing conditions for optimal quality, but require relatively little irrigation thanks to its deep rooting system. Melon crops are susceptible to bacterial wilts and that are spread by insects. Pollination is reliant on bees and must be timed by the grower as flowers only open for 1 day. Melons have variable post-harvest quality traits, but generally cantaloupes can have quite good storage properties.